biggest spiritual festival, the Divine Dip at the Spiritual Sangam, a sacred confluence of faith, culture and heritage. NDTV's mega coverage of the Mega Fest. NDTV at Mahakumbh 2025.
Today, we are in conversation with a person who is transforming the future of payments and trucking industry.
Trucking is actually what drives majority of goods movement globally. An average driver is actually driving 150,000 miles a year. Most important thing is to help small businesses in better earnings for their drivers. All human history is a timeline of exploration. I'm an explorer at heart.
This week on India Ascends. Hello and welcome. This is India Ascends. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. It's a brand new year and a brand new start to India Ascends. Before we get you the headlines, this Friday evening, the QR code, viewers, that is coming on your screens is what you need to scan to get all the stories, perspectives and big interviews that matter to the global Indian. First up, headlines this Friday evening. From supporting the junta to openly backing rebels fighting it, India Ascends exposes China's carrot and stick policy in Myanmar that is behind the present mess of the country. India ramps up security along crucial Siliguri corridor ahead of Islamabad's first military drills in Bangladesh since the 1971 Liberation War.
Creation of new counties will neither have a bearing on India's long-standing and consistent position regarding our sovereignty over the area, nor lend legitimacy to illegal and forcible occupation of the same.
New Delhi hits back after China's fresh attempts to make changes around the boundary. India rejects China's two so-called new counties with large parts of India's Aksai Chin territory in it. From economy to geopolitics, India Ascends decodes what all will be New Delhi's priorities in the new year. And 2025 turns out to not be such a happy new year for Justin Trudeau. Caucus wants the Canadian Prime Minister to resign while public trolls Trudeau on his New Year break. And after 5 years of COVID outbreak, unconfirmed reports of a new pneumonia outbreak in China goes viral, puts the world on tenterhooks. 5 years on, is the world truly prepared to handle any pandemic? We start the first episode of India Ascends in 2025 with probably the biggest crisis that's unfolding in the neighborhood, and that's Myanmar. And who's doing it is China's doing. The situation in Myanmar has reached a boiling point as ethnic armed organizations like the Arakan Army have gained the upper hand in the ongoing conflict. These groups now control large parts of territory, including key border points with Bangladesh, dealing a heavy blow to Myanmar's military junta. In fact, the map that we are going to put out for you viewers, that tells you exactly what's happening. For China, this power shift could be disastrous as it threatens its multi-billion-dollar infra projects and strategic investments in the country. And at the heart of China's interests lie the China-Myanmar economic corridor that you can see, a flagship initiative that promises to secure China's energy supplies while sidestepping the choke point that is the Strait of Malacca. But most think that Beijing is really part of the problem. Its support for the military junta after the 2021 coup, being the single largest provider of arms to the junta and trying to mainstream the brutal army have all contributed the mess that Myanmar is in right now. But that's only half of the complex geopolitical game. On one hand, China is making overtures to the junta, supporting infra projects like the new Yangon City and several others, the railway line. And on the other hand, it uses the carrot and stick strategy to reach out to the ethnic armed organizations as well, trying to cut their resources, cut their supply lines, try and make them also on China's side. But with this rising instability in Myanmar, what is really happening is that China's bet is actually now a double-edged sword. And the kicker really is that China has everything to lose. If the junta crumbles, it risks losing control of crucial territories and pipelines, not to mention the rare earth minerals that are essential to its high-tech industries. With rebel groups gaining ground in those resource-rich regions, Beijing is facing increasing disruptions to its supply chains. Prices of rare earth materials have surged, putting pressure on China's economy and, most importantly, its EV ambitions. In northern Shan state, meanwhile, Chinese investment projects are now under the control of rebels and People's Defense Forces, further complicating China's plans. These groups now hold the geopolitical leverage. They dictate the terms of trade and military influence along Myanmar's border with China, none of which is what Beijing really anticipated when it started getting into this Myanmar mess. And as the situation continues to spiral, China finds itself between a rock and a hard place. It is caught between supporting the embattled junta and maintaining a relationship with the increasingly powerful rebels with which it has no hold on. And it's not just Myanmar. The ripple effects are actually being felt in the entire region, including in India. The instability is pushing New Delhi to now shore up its defenses along the porous Myanmar-India border. And as China's investments face mounting risks, it may soon find itself on the losing end of a wider regional conflict, one that could drag India and several other players in it as well. Beijing has tried to juggle both sides, but in this high-risk game, it may soon discover that it cannot have its cake and eat it too. And suppose the junta falls and the rebels actually gain control. In that case, China will be left holding an empty bag, investments at risk, and strategic projects all hanging by a thread. In the end, China may have underestimated the stakes. Myanmar was meant to be a crown jewel in Beijing's BRI. Instead, it's turning out to be a costly gamble, one where China seems to have placed all the wrong bets. All right, shifting focus now to the first wide-angle story. It's a new year, and with it, there are new expectations. And we now tell what all should India now be looking forward to in 2025. Firstly, India should look forward to becoming a bigger economy. By all estimates, India will surpass Germany to become the fourth largest economy this year. Of course, with a growth bump, India needs to now make sure that private investments pick up. At 3.2% of the GDP, government cannot invest anymore. It has to come from private sector. Services will drive Indian economy, but answers will be needed on how to create jobs, especially for a young country like India. So that's something that's going to be a focus area that New Delhi needs to prioritize. The second thing that India will be looking forward to, well, is a Trump presidency. There's a fair chance that Prime Minister Modi may be invited to the inauguration ceremony, which is a first for any US president in over a century. His cabinet, his own position on Bangladeshi Hindus should give comfort to the present dispensation in New Delhi that the issue regarding Bangladeshi Hindus will be addressed by the US. As for tariffs, the impact will be felt. But let's remember that the average tariff rate in the 1960s was about 16%. It's now come down to 3%. The worst that can happen is it probably will go to 4, maybe 4.5%, after which it will start hurting the US consumers and probably, or hopefully, will be rolled back. The other thing that India needs to now look forward to is this year. It will play a pivotal role in the immediate neighborhood. The upheaval in Myanmar that we just spoke about, the slow recovery in Sri Lanka since its 2022 bankruptcy, the constant terror fighting that's taking place between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistan, and the downfall in Bangladesh due to the radical fringe elements that will all require New Delhi to step up using both diplomatic and, yes, economic tools. This year, India will emerge as the new fulcrum, not just in Asia, but in the world as well. All right, shifting focus now to the other big story that we are tracking and the second wide-angle story. 54 years after the birth of Bangladesh, the country under Mohammad Yunus is now forging ties with its arch enemy, Pakistan, the one with which it wanted to break away. Dhaka and Islamabad are closing ranks after decades of estrangement since the birth of Bangladesh, and India now faces a two-front challenge, one where China and Myanmar are bound to compound matters. This report tells you what are India's options in 2025 of this emerging scenario.
India is facing an escalating threat as military ties between Pakistan and Bangladesh surge to unprecedented levels. The high-stakes power play could alter the balance of security in South Asia. BSF is keeping a close vigil along the high-security North Bengal frontier, which guards the critical Siliguri corridor, a lifeline for India's northeastern states. The corridor's strategic importance has never been more apparent.
मैंने अभी पूरा नॉर्थ बंगाल का जो हमारा फ्रंटियर है उसका पूरा दौरा किया है और मैंने पाया है कि बीएसएफ के द्वारा अपनी जिम्मेवारी बहुत अच्छे से निभाई जा रही है बॉर्डर गार्डिंग के संबंध में.
It is the heartbeat of India's northeastern defense, with Pakistan and Bangladesh forging an increasingly dangerous alliance. India has no choice but to ramp up its security. This region is now ground zero in a growing regional security crisis. In a shocking development, Pakistan's Joint Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Sahir Shamshad Mirza, is scheduled to visit Dhaka, the first such visit in over half a century. The move signals a dramatic shift in regional geopolitics as old enemies seem to be converging in ways that could have far-reaching consequences. The embers of old conflict, dating back to the bloody 1971 Liberation War, are being reignited. Pakistan and Bangladesh, once fierce adversaries, are now inching towards an alliance. The momentum for this shift began in Cairo, where Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif met with Bangladesh interim leader Mohammad Yunus. Details of their talks remain secret, but the implications are clear. Old wounds are being mended, and a new, more dangerous alliance is emerging. But the danger doesn't stop here. In February, Pakistani soldiers will train Bangladeshi forces for the first time since the 1971 war. To make matters worse, Bangladesh's Navy will participate in Pakistan's Aman maritime exercise. The move speaks volumes about the growing military alignment between the two nations. But perhaps the most alarming development is Pakistan's recent arms deal with Bangladesh. In August 2023, Islamabad supplied Dhaka with 60 tons of RDX and ammunition. India's BSF is now closely monitoring the situation, especially along the Teen Bigha corridor, one of the most sensitive border areas between India and Bangladesh. The newfound bonhomie between former East Pakistan and Pakistan rests on a common animosity towards India. But the question remains, how will this change the power balance in the region, with volatilities in Myanmar and China's deep linkages to Islamabad?
First inside story on the show. Is history about to repeat itself in a move that's raising eyebrows across the globe? Tensions are rising. China has ramped up its monitoring of respiratory diseases just as winter sets in. Why? Because there are cases of pneumonia from unknown origins already creeping upward. The question that everybody is asking now is this the start of another COVID-like crisis? China's National Defense Disease Control and Prevention Administration has announced that it's piloting a new system to track pneumonia and other respiratory infections. But there are concerns, and there should be, because there are parallels to the early days of the COVID-19 virus in 2020 and late 2019, when China's lack of timely information set the stage for a global pandemic that took millions of lives, disrupted life and livelihood, all of which that China could have prevented just by telling on time, which is why the world is wary this time around. Just like the early days of COVID-19, the lack of detailed information is now causing alarm. Data recently released shows an uptick in respiratory infections, particularly among children under the age of 14, mostly in northern provinces. Authorities are trying to downplay that, exactly how they did 5 years back, because till this day, it still remains unclear if the genesis of the COVID-19 virus was in fact China's animal markets. As the news spreads reminiscent of the COVID-19 scare 5 years ago, people are asking, will China be caught flat-footed again? And most importantly, will this time around it will be transparent, tell the world what is happening and ensure that the world is better prepared, unlike 2020. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side with our top voice on the show, the UN Special Rapporteur for Myanmar, talking about what all is set to happen in Myanmar and how China's influence is actually muddying the waters more. Stay with us.
And it's right there, मैं everywhere, कहीं से भी करूँ collect, spread करूँगा रे.
Download any single ID partner app, link your card and earn reward with top brand.
Get it free with single ID.
In today's interconnected world, India's voice is more crucial than ever. When India speaks, the world listens. At NDTV World, we are that voice, bringing you intelligent and insightful news from India and beyond. From geopolitics and diplomacy to economic shifts, migrations, tech disruptions, and the stories of our diaspora. We cover the news that shapes our global future. NDTV World, your new home for global news is here.
I've been reporting on all issues big and small from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
This week on India Ascends.
China's stick and carrot support to both Myanmar's junta and rebels exposed. India ramps up border defenses in the face of joint Pakistan-Bangladesh threat. From geopolitics to defense and economics, what New Delhi is looking forward to in 2025, and find out why 2025 has not proved to be a happy new year for Justin Trudeau.
All this and more only on India Ascends with me, Gaurie Dwivedi, at these timings on the NDTV network.
Mahakumbh, a festival of faith, the world's biggest spiritual festival, the divine dip at the spiritual Sangam, a sacred confluence of faith, culture and heritage. NDTV's mega coverage of the Mega Fest. NDTV at Mahakumbh 2025.
We are able to maintain the democratic fabric and the democratic system.
I want to do something that can make a difference.
welcome back. You're watching India Ascends. As said, the top voice this week is the UN Special Rapporteur for Myanmar, Thomas Andrew, speaking to us about what really is unfolding in Myanmar. Mr. Andrew, thanks much for taking out the time and speaking to me on India Ascends. Let me start by asking you, firstly, what do you think is China's role in the mess that Myanmar is in right now?
It's a very good question, and of course we need to see. China has a great deal at stake, both in terms of its business interests and the fact that it's very significant border interests with Myanmar. They've been engaging with all players most recently. They have a lot to lose in this in a conflagration right across their border, and they recognize that, and they've been working to try to address it. On the one hand, the opposition, the resistance through the National Unity Government is represented in the United Nations General Assembly. They have that seat. The Myanmar seat is held by someone who is very much opposed to the military junta. That is an encouraging sign, and the only reason that is possible is because of China, as a member of the Credentials Committee, has not objected to that. So that's a very positive step forward. On the other hand, China is the second largest source of weapons for the military junta in the world. So we have a complex situation, but we have the fundamentals for China, namely the great stake that they have in a stable border over in Myanmar, and the business interests that they have in Myanmar create significant incentives for them to try to be a force for stabilization and security in that region. We'll see. I mean, I know that discussions have been held with a variety of the players on the ground.
Yes.
Some have worked out, some have not. But certainly the fundamental is that China has a great deal at stake in what's going on in Myanmar.
Okay. The junta has said that they're going to hold an election right now. Is that possible under the present situation?
Well, there is no way that there could possibly be an election under these conditions. I mean, you cannot have an election where you detain tens of thousands of political prisoners, where you torture them, where you execute them, where it's illegal to report the truth in Myanmar, where voicing opposition to the military junta is a crime. I mean, it's ludicrous, not to mention the fact that there's a huge conflict going on in the country. There's just no way that a free and fair election could possibly occur under these conditions. In fact, what it really is an attempt to create the mirage of a democracy. And the reason it's important for the junta to try to pull this off is because, listen, they need three things to survive. They need money, they need weapons, and they need legitimacy. They've been losing access to weapons. Their sources of weapons have dropped by a third over the course of the last year. They're having very, very difficult time getting access to financing, and certainly legitimacy is a third area that they believe they could try to make headway on with respect to having an election later this year. I think it's really important for the nations of the world to call this so-called election what it really is, namely a fraud, and that particularly democracies of the world make it clear that you cannot possibly have an election, a free and fair election, under these conditions, and to be pushing and advancing the fundamentals of what a free and fair election is, and the ingredients to such a free and fair election, and the clear evidence that none of those conditions exist right now. I think we have to be very firm and clear that we reject this notion of an election in Myanmar under these conditions as an international community.
Myanmar affects Bangladesh, China, India, the entire region. And now you have Bangladesh Army Chief relying on China to address the Rohingya crisis. But one would say China is part of the problem. Do you see such overtures making matters worse?
Well, I think the first and foremost, I think we all have to recognize that things are getting worse, and that what is being attempted at this point, whether it be China or really anybody else, is not working. We need a change of course, and trying to deal with this situation incrementally, trying to gain some strategic advantage one way or the other, has simply failed. And what we need to be doing is looking at it in a comprehensive way to minimize the extent to which the junta, the military junta, is able to continue these atrocities. We need to take away their sources of weapons. We need to take away their sources of money, and we need to take away their legitimacy, the three key ingredients to their survival. Unless and until we do that, we can only see things getting worse. And the incremental attempts that we've tried up to this point as an international community or as players in the region have attempted simply have not worked. A change of course is imperative.
All right, Mr. Thomas Andrew, thanks much for speaking to me on an issue that we're going to revisit hopefully soon. All right, second inside story on the show. Justin Trudeau didn't have a good 2024. It even ended on a bad note for him. Take a look at this report that tells you why 2025 could be even worse for the Canadian Prime Minister. "2025 is shaping up to be a not-so-happy new year for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and the writing's on the wall. A new poll from Nanos Research shows the Federal Conservatives holding a commanding 47% support, far outstripping the Liberals, who are stuck at just 21%. Jagmeet Singh's NDP are closing in with 17%. As if that's not enough, his political house of cards is well on its path to collapse. Liberal MP George Chahal has joined the chorus of voices calling for the Prime Minister to step down just months ahead of the 2025 federal election. Chahal's echoed the calls of Senator Percy Down and MPs like Ken MacDonald, both urging for new leadership. The pressure is mounting as over 24 caucus members have now publicly asked the Prime Minister to reflect on his future. Despite growing calls from his own caucus to resign, Trudeau has taken some time off on a ski holiday, likely reflecting on whether it's time to bow out gracefully or fight to the bitter end. But the pressure isn't just coming from inside Parliament. Public discontent is spilling onto the streets. A shocking moment unfolded recently at a British Columbia ski resort where Trudeau was heckled in a way that could only be described as brutal.
Mr. Prime Minister.
While enjoying a day on the slopes at Red Mountain Resort in Rossland, British Columbia, a member of the public spotted the Prime Minister and let him have it, telling him to get the dash out.
Please get the out of BC.
Have a wonderful day now.
Yeah.
The incident, caught on camera and shared widely on X, highlights just how deep the public's frustration runs with the Prime Minister. With his political future now hanging in the balance, it's clear that Trudeau is now facing the fight of his life. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Ascends. Thanks so much for watching.
A festival of faith, the world's biggest spiritual festival, the divine dip at the spiritual Sangam. a sacred confluence of faith, culture and heritage. NDTV's mega coverage of the Mega Fest. NDTV at Mahakumbh 2025.
Today, we are in conversation with a person who is transforming the future of payments and trucking industry.
Trucking is actually what drives majority of goods movement globally. An average driver is actually driving 150,000 miles a year. Most important thing is to help small businesses in better earnings for their drivers. All human history is a timeline of exploration. I'm an explorer at heart.
This week on India Ascends.
China's stick and carrot support to both Myanmar's junta and rebels exposed. India ramps up border defenses in the face of joint Pakistan-Bangladesh threat. From geopolitics to defense and economics, what New Delhi is looking forward to in 2025, and find out why 2025 has not proved to be a happy new year for Justin Trudeau.
All this and more only on India Ascends with me, Gaurie Dwivedi, at these timings on the NDTV network.
To the Southern View. I'm Veera Raghav. Lots lined up on the show this evening, including that political exchange in Karnataka over the fare hike in buses. But first, let's take you through the top headlines we're tracking this hour. Actor Allu Arjun is granted regular bail by a Hyderabad court as anticipated. The actor was on a 4-week bail granted by the Telangana High Court. A war of words between the Prime Minister and Arvind Kejriwal after the Prime Minister declared AAP a disaster at a public meeting in Delhi. Kejriwal hits back and says the AAP is a blessing and not a disaster. India confirms that it has received an extradition request from Bangladesh for ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who fled to India. What next in this delicate diplomatic dance between Delhi and Dhaka? Season's worst fog disrupts flights in the north. Nearly 250 departures delayed in Delhi. Flight operations in Amritsar, Chandigarh and Guwahati also affected. It's likely to have a domino effect across the country. First up to breaking news coming in at the moment from Hyderabad. We believe the Anti-Corruption Bureau in Hyderabad, which is investigating the KT Ramarao case, has summoned him to appear before it on the 6th of January. The ACB summons BRS leader and former minister KT Ramarao in the Formula E controversy. That's the news that's coming in from Hyderabad on a day when actor Allu Arjun has also been granted bail by a Hyderabad court in the Sandhya Theatre stampede case. The actor, remember, is out on a 4-week bail granted by the Telangana High Court after he moved it to quash the FIR against him soon after his arrest. Uma Sudhir, my colleague who's been tracking both these developments closely, joins us live from Hyderabad. Uma, first to the KT Ramarao Formula E controversy, the ACB summons. Obviously, the BRS would seek legal recourse. That would be a politically important case to watch out for in Telangana.
Yes, indeed. So both the Anti-Corruption Bureau as well as the Enforcement Directorate have booked cases now in the Formula E matter, and the same kind of sections that were there. Some of them were similar and some of them were dissimilar. Of course, unauthorized payment of almost 55 crore rupees was the allegation at a time when the HMDA was not even part of the tripartite agreement. Of course, the ED is looking at PMLA regulations or whether there were any violations to PMLA and to the Foreign Exchange Maintenance Act. So, Mr. Gaurie Rao has to appear before the Anti-Corruption Bureau on the 6th of January. Remember, he's also been summoned by the Enforcement Directorate to appear before them on the 7th of January. Earlier, we had Mr. Arvind Kumar, Special Chief Secretary, who was summoned on the 2nd of January, and BLN Reddy, A3 in the same case, summoned on 3rd of January, and both of them had sought time till after Pongal or Sankranti, which would have been after the 15th of January, but they have been asked to now appear on the 8th and 9th of this month, and therefore you will have K.T. Rama Rao, if he does not seek time once again from either of these investigating agencies, appearing on the 7th of January before the ACB, 8th of January before the Enforcement Directorate, and the two others accused in the case, A2 and A3, appearing on Jan 8 and on Jan 9 as well. In the other case, of course, of Allu Arjun, the court, the Metropolitan Court, the Nampalli's Criminal Court's trial court, has in fact granted him bail on condition that he appear before the Chikkarpalli police, who is the station house officer, every Sunday between 10 and 1 p.m. for the next 2 months or till the charge sheet is filed. Of course, sureties of 2 people and 50,000 personal bond, and no permission to travel out of the country. Back to you, Veera.
Right. Thanks very much there, Uma Sudhir, for all the latest. Of course, the Allu Arjun case was anticipated. The more important one is that of K.T. Rama Rao, which is likely to become a political flashpoint in that state. We'll keep a close watch on that with Uma Sudhir. But now to our special focus this evening, the political exchange in Karnataka over the 15% bus fare hike in the state. While the government argues that the hike was essential, keeping in mind the financials of road transport corporations, the opposition BJP took to protest and argued that the fare hikes were a consequence of mismanagement of the state's finances. The decision on Thursday by the Karnataka cabinet will bring in 784 crore annually to the RTCs, and the government's argument is that the fare hike was essential, keeping in mind both the fact that it has not been done for over a decade in most RTCs and 5 years in BMTC, and inflation and price rises was resulting in losses for the road transport corporations. The opposition party's accusations that the state's welfare guarantees, including the free bus ride for women, is leading to financial pressures, and the burden for it is being transferred on to the citizens. Let's just listen in to some reactions from the people before we get into our deep dive discussion this evening.
They are the actual looters. See, this is, I'll send you between 2008 and 13, Mr. Ashok was transport minister. 30% he raised. Totally 6 times. 30%. 30% he raised 7 times. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times he raised.
They're telling ladies free, first wife free, husband double. Means what? I think this two-blade Siddaramaiah, two-blade government, this is common sense. Every people will know this is the double to husband means they have to pay, the entire house have to pay. People are scolding this government. People are scolding Siddaramaiah. He is the worst CM never seen in the Karnataka history.
The government has hiked the bus fare by 15% here in Karnataka across all platforms, whether it is ordinary buses or deluxe or premium buses. 15% more will be charged across all platforms, but it will be free for women. Now you will have to pay 15% more. What you have to say?
It is not fair. So hiking of 15% of the ticket, is it not? So when you give free ticket to the ladies, So they have to concern for the gents also.
But what they are saying that the diesel price has gone up, and for the last 5 years price was not high. There was no hike. That's why it has been raised now.
It's all in government's hand, is it not? So we cannot say we cannot depend upon the petrol or diesel hike. When the government decides, so they can do anything.
So the reaction is that the daily commuters, they want that the price should be reduced because they are not willing to pay 15% more because there is a price rise almost everywhere. But the government is saying that they have no choice. For the last 5 years, price has not been, the fare was not hike, there was no hike in the fare. So now they have no choice but to hike the fare, and that is why 15% fare has been raised. From 5th of this month, they will have to pay 15% more, whether they are traveling by an ordinary bus or deluxe bus, or they are traveling by premium buses. With camera person Kumar, Nehal Kidwai for NDTV.
Well, so the question this evening, is this just a just and fair fare hike, or is it a consequence of expenditure on the state's welfare schemes and financial mismanagement as alleged by the opposition? Joining me this evening